Well, good morning, good afternoon, YouTube. Welcome back to the channel. This is the Cultural Confederacy. You know, it's a great day to be an American. It really is. When I say good morning, good afternoon, YouTube, as far as I know, I could be getting somebody who's watching the series at midnight in Zimbabwe. But that's the fun part about doing these videos. I never know who's watching. Now, this is a remake of a video I posted last night. By the way, I'm enjoying my corncob pipe again, smoking some velvet, drinking my Great Value Donut Shop coffee, as always. Good stuff, good stuff. But I did a video last night, and this comes from NBC4 New York, where they're planning today to vote in New York City Hall on whether or not they want to remove this Thomas Jefferson statue in the New York City Hall chamber. So for those of you in New York City who believe in freedom of speech, you don't like the fact that people are taking down statues or burning and banning books, getting rid of anything they find offensive, that I want you to get off your ass, go down to New York City Hall, and I want you carrying a banner that says they were censoring the music of Shostakovich in Russia. Do not censor us here. Seriously, get off your ass, go down to New York City Hall, carry a banner that says they were censoring the music of Shostakovich in Russia. Do not censor us here. And I guarantee you're going to turn heads. You're probably going to get some media coverage, all thanks to me, the Cultural Confederacy. I shouldn't gloat or lift myself up. Actually, in real life, I'm a pretty humble guy. I really am. Really down-to-earth guy. Hey, I eat, sleep, and use the restroom like everybody else. But I'm going to go through this article and kind of give you my take here. And I don't mean to repeat myself on this series, but I can't drive this home enough. If we take down everything that we find offensive, then we're not going to have anything left to talk about, to write about, to debate about. That's the purpose of free speech. We live in the greatest country on the planet. Let's not turn this into a third world dictatorship. So they're planning to take down this Jefferson statue at New York City Hall in the New York City Chamber. And I believe the statue dates back to 1833, or it's modeled after another statue of Thomas Jefferson. So this is being driven by the little-known City Board Public Design Commission, which is expected to approve the removal of a Thomas Jefferson statue today from City Council chambers. It's going to be moved to the New York Historical Society as on a long-term basis. I think it's more going to be permanent. Now, I got a question for all those of you who are for taking down this Thomas Jefferson statue because he owned slaves. Do you know who owned the most slaves in history? At least in modern times that we know of. And by modern, I mean going back to like the 13th, 14th century. It was Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa owned tens of thousands of slaves. And guess what? He wasn't white. He was part of the Mali Empire, the Islamic West African state. 14th century. One of the richest, if not the richest, slave owners in human history. So the richest slave owner in the United States, compared to the rest of the world, wasn't Thomas Jefferson. I'm going to say John. I'm thinking of the gentleman who was the richest. Man, can I get the words out? Can I get my proper verbiage out here on the video today? Can you tell I'm trying to do this in one shot? Okay, this video is a train wreck. Let's just stop the video now, right? Okay, so I'll get through this here. So as I said, the statue dates back from 1833. But the richest slave owner in the United States back in the day was actually John Armfield, not Thomas Jefferson. And I saw something from the Daily News where they're saying, well, if we're going to take down Thomas Jefferson, let's take down these statues of George Washington. Let's rename all these streets that were named after George Washington. But this is going to be in another long line of removals of Thomas Jefferson statues due to, as I said, Jefferson owning slaves. Now, asked about the fate of the statue on Thursday, Mayor Bill de Blasio, Mayor DeBozo, said that Jefferson's history as a slave owner profoundly bothers people and why they find it something that they can't ignore or can't be ignored. Now, the group that's really behind this is the Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus of the Council, which said in a statement, that the city government should, quote, resolve that the individuals memorialized within the confines of our people's house be reflective not only of the best traditions of our city's history and its diversity, but unquestionable character. Unquestionable character. Well, last time I checked, New York City, just like Boston, was a major slave auction hub back in the day. And they didn't free their slaves overnight. They used this thing called gradual emancipation. And generally speaking, it wasn't the living slaves that were freed. It was their offspring after the offspring had served so many years of service. And if you're going to call yourself a very diverse group, the Black, Latino, and Asian caucus, why don't you include statues of everybody? Instead of taking the statue down, keep it up. Now, Jefferson, the nation's third president, has become a controversial figure in recent years as advocates for racial justice, of course, have demanded the removal of statues of Confederate generals and others who carried out racist policies. Well, why don't we take down all these statues and symbols from Africa? Why don't we get rid of the pyramids? Why don't we get rid of the Colosseum in Rome? Because what about Iran, ancient Persia? Why don't we get rid of any symbol that represents any of these countries? Because at one time they had slaves. At one time they had slaves. And a lot of these policies in the United States, i.e. Jim Crow, didn't just affect African Americans or newly freed blacks, but also tens of thousands of poor whites. The Irish were segregated. The Polish, the Jewish communities were segregated in this country. Now, the big controversy is this idea that Jefferson wrote, all men are created equal, in the Declaration of Independence. And yet he was a slave owner. Well, at the time, slavery was an acceptable practice, but you also had indentured servitude. You had a lot of poor white Europeans that came over to this country through indentured servitude, which in many ways was like slavery. In fact, those terms were interchangeable because you didn't say slavery in those days, you said slave labor. Okay, that's the term that was most likely used was slave labor. Now, I know in the CSA Constitution, they call African slavery, or this is already Negro slavery, by name, but generally speaking, you would have said slave labor. Indentured servitude, or any form of labor, was included in that. Now, I mentioned this before. This will blow a lot of people away. The last state in the Union to end slavery, or to officially become a free state, was Colorado in 2018 because they still had slave language on the books. And that was due to the 13th Amendment. Even though the 13th Amendment ended slavery, abolished slavery, each state had to adopt that amendment. But the 13th Amendment did allow for slave labor in the case of criminal punishment. So because of that, states like Colorado still had this language on their books, quote unquote, slave language, which allowed for slavery or would classify them as a non-free state. So in 2018, Colorado became a free state, officially a free state, once they got rid of that language in their constitution. Now, when Jefferson was talking about all men are created equal, he wasn't talking about equality among the races. And yes, it is true that Thomas Jefferson held racist views. Well, so did everybody else back in the day. And those same views they had against groups like the Irish or the Scottish. Because a lot of times, these groups, freed black men, slaves, the Irish, the Scottish, even Asians, were all lumped into the same economic and social category. Life was built more on a class system. But if you were a freedman back in the day, let's say that you were freed by a slave owner and you had inherited some wealth, you could go out and buy a plantation and you could buy slaves. That's how the system worked. That's how it worked. But when Jefferson said all men are created equal, he wasn't talking about, as I said, equality amongst the races. He was talking about equality of British citizens. Because you see, when we seceded from Great Britain, we were part of that country, part of Great Britain. And what the founders wanted is they wanted to guarantee and preserve the rights that they were afforded under the Constitution by Parliament. By Parliament. That's what he meant. That's what Jefferson meant by all men are created equal. He was talking about the rights that were guaranteed under the Constitution by Parliament. The king wasn't abiding by that. So they said, well, to hell with you. We're going to create this thing called the United States, which wasn't created as a quote-unquote nation. We were a confederate of states. Each state was seen as sovereign and independent, able to carry out its own affairs. And the federal government, its only role was to protect the homeland and handle international affairs. That's it. That's it. Wasn't to give you Medicare or Social Security. So as I mentioned, this statue, this Jefferson statue that they're planning to vote on today to take down, was modeled after another statue by sculptor please forgive my pronunciation here, Pierre-Jean-David d'Angers, I believe is how you pronounce it. It's French. I'm sorry, I don't speak French. But the last name is D''Angers. So once again, if you believe in freedom and you live in New York City where this is affecting you, get off your rear end, go down to City Hall and carry that banner that says, they were censoring the music of Shostakovich in Russia. Don't censor us here. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please click that like button, subscribe, hit me up on Instagram at #JasonComposes, leave comments below. And now you can reach me at Twitter, Cultural Confederacy at Twitter. This is the Cultural Confederacy saying peace out, stay safe everybody, God bless this great country. I'll catch you next time, and let's protect freedom.